From F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, this is Missile Minutiae, the official podcast of the 90th Missile Wing and the Wranglers of F.E. Warren. Here are your hosts.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I am Glenn Robertson with the Public Affairs Office. Unfortunately, Sergeant Placey is not able to join us today. I am going to be interviewing two folks from the Wing Staff Agency, one the museum director and the other one the base historian, Paula Taylor and Kyle Brislan. Paula, how are you doing today?
I am awesome. How are you today?
I'm doing great to be here with you guys. Thanks for asking.
How about you, Kyle? How you doing?
It's a wonderful day to work in the Air Force.
This is going to be a fun one.
That's
So.
okay.
We are actually going to be discussing a little bit of the Wrangler culture, the history of the base. We might take a few side roads because we tend to do that, Paula, Kyle, and I. But one way or the other, we will get through this, and hopefully there will be some information that people will enjoy listening to. So, regarding Wrangler history, we've recently taken on this name of Wranglers, or retaken this name of Wranglers. To your best knowledge, where did that name, the Wrangler name, originally come from, and what was it used for?
So, interestingly, the 90th Missile Wing employed the trooper as its original mascot, which I'll let Paula get into a little bit later, but it looks like through the sources that we've been able to find and look at and examine that the Wrangler became a permanent part of the 90th Missile Wing culture around 1994. But outside of the few documents which highlight kind of this chronological shift or evolutionary shift in mascots within the missile wings, we really have a lack of sources that detail why we chose the Wrangler initially. It would have been interesting to be on a fly on the wall during those conversations. Unfortunately, that aspect of history, during the 60s and 70s, and even, when you get into the 80s, that cultural aspect of history wasn't well documented or preserved.
So Kyle had mentioned that, Paula, you've got something about the trooper. How does that play into it?
Well, in bicentennial of the United States, the museum was opening and the city of Cheyenne was celebrating their anniversaries, and a group was started that was the 5th Cavalry organized, which had been a cavalry troop here in the 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s. And this group was reenacting that original group. Because of that, we had 20 or 30 men dressed up in historic uniforms of a cavalry officer and troops from the 1870s Indian Wars time period. And because we had access to this type of outfit, it was very logical just to take that on. Because we had been open 153 years, it just seemed to fit the whole nature of who we were and what we were.
So you kind of mentioned when you were talking earlier, Kyle, that there's a shortage of information, things aren't exactly clear. Are there any straight conflicts? Are there anything that doesn't quite jive in the documented history as to who used the name Wrangler first?
Absolutely, yeah. Like I was talking about, there's really some conflicting sources out there about us and Malmstrom Air Force Base on who employed the Wrangler as its mascot. But also there's this additional thing where some bases had team names and they also had mascots. So the sources kind of highlight that the 341st Missile Wing over at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana utilized the Wrangler first as its mascot. However, F.E. Warren was known as a team as the Warren Wranglers, creating this kind of unique scenario where the same name's being used for two different reasons, I guess.
Sure. I guess it doesn't help that two cultures of Montana and Wyoming, they kind of probably lend themselves pretty well to having some kind of overlap with the Western culture.
But yeah, it is kind of interesting to, both of those cultures adopt that Wrangler personification as a great way to create morale in the early days of the missile competitions when they started employing mascots for friendly banter.
Sure, makes sense.
But by 1994, we see a conclusive shift, I guess, in mascots and names to where the 90th Missile Wing is the Warren Wranglers. They have the Wrangler mascot, and that becomes kind of a solidified aspect of its culture.
Gotcha. Interesting. So you kind of already got into this, but just for clarification's sake, the official documented usage that you found, that was about 1994, you said?
For both the Wrangler and as a mascot and as a team name.
Gotcha. Okay.
Actually, around 1970s is when we see the Warren Wranglers first mentioned as a team in the missile competitions.
Gotcha. Okay.
This is both shown through document primary sources as well as oral histories. That around 1971 is when we see the Warren Wranglers as a team first mentioned.
Okay.
But during this time, it is important to note that that wasn't the mascot, though. It was still the troopers.
Gotcha. Off air, you and I have talked about some of this before. You shared a story with me that I really enjoyed. Could you share that story that you found about the Wrangler and more broadly about the mascots of Global Strike and SAC?
Absolutely, yeah. And I know Paula has a little stuff she wants to talk about as well, with more of the culture behind it and the development of individual mascots. But the development of team names and mascots emerged during the Strategic Air Command days.
Sure.
So, Missile Combat Challenge first emerged in 1967 under the nickname Curtain Raiser. Missileers competed for a variety of reasons, to challenge their skills, but to also discuss effective ways for solving operational problems that may emerge, and just for improving mission operations. So it created this friendly environment, but also competitive, that put the Missileers to the test in a encouraging but also competitive manner.
Sure.
I guess is the best way to put it. For 5 days, missile combat crews from Strategic Air Command's ICBM wings competed for the Blanchard Trophy and to be named the best missile wing within the command. Unfortunately, SAC canceled Curtain Raiser the next year due to a variety of reasons, but the command revived the event the following year, renaming it Olympic Arena. So as this missile competition evolved throughout the years, naturally you have a bunch of Air Force members, missileers competing, competition and friendly banter emerge. So what we see is the development of distinct team names, distinct mascots that continue to evolve until what we have today, which is the Warren Wranglers, the Malmstrom Grizzlies. But they actually started out a little different, and over the years, but like I said, in 1994 there was a distinct change, and then once we transitioned back to Global Strike, there was another change as well in mascots. But they kind of just emerged out of this. It's morale building.
Sure.
We can all unite under the same team name.
Sure.
Defines culture, but it just makes for friendly banter as well. Like, I know Paula's going to talk a little bit about one of the mascots is a stump.
Is a stump.
A stump.
Okay.
A stump, yes.
Please do tell
Yes.
about the stump.
Well, I've heard of the stump multiple times, and in an oral history interview, I heard about it again.
Okay.
And basically, what happened is that Whiteman didn't have a mascot. They drove a Cadillac around base, and that was kind of what their thing was.
A Cadillac.
A Cadillac. And
Well,
then
at least it's high class.
they got jealous
They
because
get-
all the other bases had these cool mascots, and they didn't know what they were going to do. So basically, they were walking in the forest area and found a stump.
Here's our mascot. This
They
is
became known as the Stump Guys.
the Stump
The
Guys.
Stump Guys.
Stump
They were
Guys.
very proud of it.
They were proud of their stump.
And it was
Okay.
painted in multiple colors each
Okay.
year.
Okay.
And it was used and taken to the event and was honored
Well, that's
by
good.
them, which is kind of cool
Sure.
when you think about it.
Well,
Most of these mascots make logical sense.
Sure.
Vandenberg Hawks, the Patrick Sharks. I mean, if you're in Florida, yeah, that makes
Sure.
sense. Peterson Knights, Minot Rough Riders with Teddy Roosevelt.
Sure.
And I was told that they had the coolest add-on to their mascot. They carried axe handles, and they would hold them like a staff.
Mm-hmm.
And when something was celebrating for them, they would hit it on the ground and make this thud that would resonate throughout the whole conference room and just enlivened everybody. Awesome, I am told. Something that somebody's remembered from the 70s.
Sure. Sure.
That was kind of cool. Then you have the Malmstrom Grizzlies, of course,
Sure.
up in Montana. That makes sense. And rightly so, we became the Wranglers. That
Sure.
in Wyoming just makes sense.
Sure.
Perfect sense.
So, this one is more for you, Paula, I think. In your opinion, how do you see the name Wrangler fitting into the 90th Missile Wing, and more particularly F.E. Warren and our early days as D.A. Russell?
Well, I'm somewhat biased. Most of you know I'm a fifth-generation ranch daughter, so my heart is always in Wyoming. And because of that, we're located with our base in the state of Wyoming, which is known as the Cowboy State. And the logo for Wyoming is Steamboat, the bucking horse with a rider riding on it. And you find it abundantly throughout Wyoming on all kinds of things. I also, personally, I believe that the Wyoming Code of Ethics, which was adopted in March 3rd of 2010, can play in part to this mascot of us being named the Wranglers. I don't know if any of you know what the Code of Ethics is all about, but our Wyoming State Legislature passed the 10 ethics derived from the book Cowboy Ethics by James P. Owen. And I'd like to just mention those 10 ethics because I think they typify what we as airmen are doing on this base in a Western way. 1. Live each day with courage. 2. Take pride in your work. 3. Always finish what you start. 4. Do what has to be done. 5. Be tough, be fair. When you make a promise, keep it is number 6. 7. Ride for the brand. 8. Talk less, say more. 9. Remember that some things are not for sale. And lastly, 10. Know where to draw the line. And I really believe that F.E. Warren Airmen does all 10 of these ethics outstandingly in our state of Wyoming.
That's good. That's really good. Cool.
Well, that has probably been one of the more interesting interviews I've conducted in the 4 years I've been here.
I'd like to say thank you to Miss Paula Taylor
And thank you, Mr. Kyle Brislan, for being available.
Thank you for allowing us to share some of our heritage that we both love with everybody else at our base.
I'm happy for the opportunity. I'm really glad that you guys were available. Kyle, any last parting shots?
Thanks for having us on, Glenn. Glad to share the history and heritage of the 90th Missile Wing F.E. Warren Air Force Base.
Sure.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to come by the museum to check everything out, check out the history, or feel free to give us a ring if you want to talk more about history.
Sure.
For anyone listening at home, if you want to get in touch with the museum, the phone number is 307-773-2980. That number again is 773-2980.
That is our podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and hopefully you got as much out of it as I did. We will see you next time where we interview and talk to the folks from the Area Defense Council. Thanks again.